We've just had the fourth week of public hearings and we've heard from 38 witnesses in that time. Already a mountain of evidence has been amassed. I'm Peter Biles at the Iraq Inquiry, taking place here in central London. On Monday we heard from the military top brass, the generals who were in Baghdad and Basra in 2004 and 2005. This was the period when the Iraqi insurgency took root and when security deteriorated fast.
The basic wheels of bureaucracy just didn't exist. So the government was facing a huge challenge without the fact that it was also in the middle of a very serious security situation. A security situation with a growing insurgency, but there was reluctance for people to call it an insurgency, and I think Secretary of Defence Rumsfeld had instructed that it wasn't to be called an insurgency. I think he called it a bunch of no-hopers carrying out some terrorist acts. But it was an incipient insurgency.
But does that description affect the way people operated on the ground? Because you saw it insurgency, it was seen as something different by Rumsfeld?
I think so, because if you recognise that something is an insurgency, then you are using a different method to counter it than if you think it's merely terrorism. If you think it's merely terrorism, you use merely counter-terrorist tactics and activities on the basis that if you kill or capture all the terrorists, you've probably solved your problem, which of course is not the case in an insurgency.
One issue that came up repeatedly this week was the length of British military postings to Iraq.
You were both there for 6 months. Is this long enough for a senior commander in such a position?
A lot of people had been saying it wasn't long enough. I said it wasn't long enough when I left Sarajevo in a similar role in 2002. I said so again in writing in my post-tour report, and I think it's only surprising that, or maybe not, that hasn't been implemented as policy. There was one of my successors, General Lamb, who was there for the best part of a year, but otherwise they were all there either 6 months or slightly less.
Just explain to you what the consequences were of this quite rapid turnover.
Yes. Unless you were careful, you were treated as passing trade. People knew that if you were only there for 6 months, or in some cases of the senior staff members, less than 6 months, they knew that, I'm talking about Iraqi interlocutors, ministers, would know that, you know, the next time you came through their door, you'd be saying goodbye. So they, unless you were careful, weren't establishing the closeness of a relationship with you that they would with somebody who they knew was there for a year, or more than a year. And I think that's true with all the Iraqis with whom one dealt. And in the headquarters, certainly with the huge majority of the headquarters being American, they were all there for a year at least. And I don't think it reflected very well on the UK that we chose only to be there for half that time.
Tuesday will be remembered as the day when the inquiry went private for the first time. The committee chairman, Sir John Chilcot, took advantage of the 1-minute delay in the video broadcast to block the words of Sir Jeremy Greenstock, Britain's former special envoy in Baghdad.
Ambassador Bremer was responding to the Pentagon in trying to run a best-case scenario approach, and that's why he didn't want alternative plans. But when I talked to other members of the American team, when I talked informally to the military, to the intelligence agencies, to other people who were operating, I found a very much more gloomy prognosis of what was going on than I felt or understood Ambassador Bremer was reporting back to the Pentagon. I reported these things.
And then, without warning, this halt to proceedings. Had Sir Jeremy Greenstock, one of the country's most experienced diplomats, compromised British security? We were left in the dark.
I want to say I interrupted the broadcast briefly this morning because there was a mention of sensitive information, and as it's defined in our published protocols, and so we had to interrupt very briefly. Thank you.
It was unfortunate that the short suspension overshadowed much of Sir Jeremy Greenstock's detailed account of post-war Iraq.
What was your understanding of the responsibilities of the United Kingdom immediately post-invasion as an occupying power, together with the Americans?
The responsibilities of the United Kingdom immediately after the conflict was over were, of course, not easily clarified. I don't know whether anybody has used this phrase with you in witness statements before. I haven't seen it. But there was a view that our invasion of Iraq could be a catastrophic success.
Yes.
That is, it would happen so quickly and Saddam's regime would collapse so fast that we would be left holding a baby without the materials for looking after it. And that, indeed, was what happened.
Now, you've already drawn a number of important lessons from this, and we're on a lessons learned exercise. Are there any other lessons for future policy making that you would draw from the whole Iraq experience?
Well, I think there are a number of lessons, and I think that the full range of them will probably need another session. But there are two in particular. One is to regard the aftermath as just as important a mission as the military action period. Secondly, to put security first, because nothing can be done in the political and economic spheres, etc., without security. This was clearly, from its history, too rushed an exercise for the size of the task that we found on the ground, a task which some people had been predicting would be as difficult as it was. So to have this degree of mismatch is something that has to be avoided in the future.
Also on Tuesday, there was a comprehensive view of conditions in southern Iraq, the area of mainly British responsibility after the war.
There was a probably wildly unrealistic expectation that we were going to wave a wand and that southern Iraq would suddenly leap ahead. But I could see why, and I shared, I think, their sense of frustration. Southern Iraq is dirt poor. It's dirt poor by comparison to Kuwait on one side, but it's poor even by comparison with Baghdad. You go around Baghdad and you could be in Italy, in large chunks of it anyway, or in southern Italy. It's a developed, organized, everything else, and southern Iraq was not. And I felt that there was an opportunity there, and indeed a necessity, when you look at the fact that the line of communication flowed through there, that we had the country's one major port, that we were sitting on top of a huge oil and gas reserve, to really flow money in. And this is not a comment about the British government, but as a coalition. And I felt that if we had been able to do that, then we would have changed the dynamics of the politics and their reaction to us. Now, the counter-argument is that security even then wasn't good enough, and that if security isn't good enough, then the money just pours away. So I'm expressing my personal feeling there rather than commenting on the accuracy of the judgment.
There's a more robust line of questioning beginning to emerge from the members of the inquiry. They want to know about the cost of the war in Iraq, the political, the financial, and the human cost of the conflict. And they want to know about the lessons that can be learned for the future. And that was very much the theme of Wednesday's evidence.
One of the advantages, one of the great clarities of the American military system is the simplicity and accountability of their chains of command. I don't think they felt they saw the same thing on our side.
And what did you feel? Did we have insufficient clarity of command?
I felt they were right.
They were right. Do you think that we have since then drawn the right lessons for the future about the way the command is operated in these circumstances? Have there been changes?